Hey guys, what's happening? Chris here. Today I'm going to talk about one of the foundations of designing any game, the principles of game design. These principles will help you not only evaluate your game, but also improve it and make sure the game experience you are designing is the best for your players. The first principle is focus. What I mean by this is that a game always has to have a certain focus or direction. Otherwise, the player is not going to know what they're supposed to do or how to do it. As designers, we need to provide direction for what the gameplay experience should be and how the player will interact with it. An example of this will be creating a game level that supports the gameplay mechanics and guides the player to a specific goal. Even when the gameplay is about discovery and exploration, there is an invisible hand that is guiding the player through the experience. For example, in a game like Mario, it usually is moving from left to right in order to rescue the princess. The next principle is anticipation. In animation, there is a principle that is called anticipation, which is the state when a character is preparing to do an action. In games, this principle is similar and refers to when something is about to happen. The player needs to know so that they can react accordingly. An example of this would be an attack from a boss. You as a player know it is coming because the boss is charging the attack and then the attack is delivered. Another example of this is that in a horror game, you might hear the sound of a monster before you actually see the monster.
Sorry.
The next principle is behavior. This principle refers to the logic of how a game should work and the laws that it has set. It also has to do with what a player expects to happen at certain points in the game. If you break this principle, players will be confused and possibly not know what is going on. A classic example of this is when the player's health is low. You might see effects on the screen combined with slow heart rate sounds in order to let the player know that they are about to die. The next principle is physics. This principle refers to the logic that the player expects in regards to physics laws. This principle can be broken depending on the level of realism of your game, but it is important to keep in mind, especially for very realistic games. An example of this will be a car racing game. In a game like this, you need to make sure that when the car turns at high speeds, you as a player need to feel the car drifting and simulating what will happen in real life. The next principle is sound. To be honest, I see a lot of designers neglect it and just put it in the back burner for later. I think that sound design is an integral part of game design, as it can definitely change a gameplay experience depending on how it's done. One example for this would be the sound of guns firing in The Last of Us. When you fire a gun in that game, it feels meaty. As a player, it makes you feel powerful and in control of the encounter. Now, if the sound of the guns was something like this, then the game wouldn't feel the same. It adds realism to the experience and makes it way more immersive. The next principle is pacing, and this is a very important one because pacing can either make or break your game. Pacing refers to the rate at which high intensity and low intensity moments occur. If we put too many high intensity moments one after the other, then we're not giving the player a break. If we put too many low intensity moments together, the player might lose interest and get bored. The idea is to have high intensity moments like claustrophobic levels and big combat encounters combined with low intensity moments like appreciating the view of a vista or running through an expansive world. I have a video about this if you're interested in learning more about this topic. The next principle refers to the world and levels in the game and is called spacing. This principle is about making sure that the levels you design support the gameplay experience that you want to give to your players. You don't want to have a level in which there are too many enemies and the space feels crowded. You always want to have your levels support your gameplay mechanics and make sure that the player and the enemies have advantages and disadvantages so that it feels fair for the player. The next principle is probably the most important, and it is the player. In this principle, you need to consider how the player might interact with all of the game systems. This principle not only applies to the player's input throughout the game, but also how the player moves through your levels, how they combat against different enemies, and how they interact with the progression systems as you play more levels. The next principle is communication, and it's about how you are communicating different things to a player. Communication is very important in game design, because we, as designers, need to communicate with our players to tell them what to do or what to expect. An example of this would be giving a player a specific objective. Does the player understand what they need to do? Why do they need to do it? Maybe we're not being clear with the message, or maybe we need to change something in our direction so that they're more aware of a certain element. These are all things that can affect our communication with our players, and we need to make sure that they understand. Otherwise, they might stop playing out of frustration. The last principle is appeal, and this one has to do with the whole appeal of your game. What is your game's hook? What makes your game fun or engaging? These are all questions that you need to ask yourself in order to understand what makes your game unique. How are you communicating that to your player? If you think about a game like Mario, if that game was just running from left to right, it wouldn't be a fun game. So the game designers added enemies, power-ups, and obstacles that support that kind of movement in order to be able to make the game fun and increase its appeal. Game design principles can help you evaluate your game in these different areas of design and can help you improve your game's design and make sure that it provides the gameplay experience you are aiming for, while meeting the expectations of potential players that are going to be experiencing it. And that's it, you guys. Thank you so much for watching. What principles have helped you most in your game designs? Please let me know in the comment section below. Also, if you like this video, please subscribe and share it with your friends. See you next time!